Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. We have here today a very special guest, a man who's done some of the makeup work on some of my most favorite horror movies of all time. Movies like Night of the Demons, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Blob, Dead Heat, and many more. We're going to get into that here today. Please welcome to the show, Nick Benson. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Great. How you doing, man?
Hey, man, I'm having a blast. Look here. We're going to get deep into your story, but, you know, like any good story, we want to start at the beginning and kind of get a taste of, was this something that you had in you as a kid, like creating things with this makeup stuff, or, you know, this happened later on?
No, it started pretty early. My family was all in the business. I had a stepfather that was an editor in the business.
Okay.
My mom was an executive for Universal Pictures.
Oh.
So it kind of was all around me all my life. And I got really obsessed with the Universal monsters pretty early on. And
Yeah.
it just kind of grew from there, you know?
I mean, so like, were you on some of the sets and stuff with this going on, or
Yeah,
behind
absolutely.
the scenes?
As a matter of fact, just yesterday, someone had posted something about Jaws 3. My stepfather was an editor on Jaws 3. And I posted a picture on their little post about, like, there was a picture of me when I'm about 12 years old making fun of my little sister, and my mom's like putting her arm in the mouth of the shark. It was silly. We were on set, but it was fun.
Now that was the one where they were underwater, right? They had like that little thing
Yeah, with the really bad CG, the roaring shark.
Yeah, the roaring
stuff.
shark that broke the
super cheesy.
Yeah, how did the sharks roar back in those days?
That was my first question, even that young. I was like, I didn't know sharks roared. That's interesting.
I think at that point Jaws was just such, you know, like a mega hit. I figure you figure they're not even going to look that deep into it. But still, to this day, holds water because they're still doing shark movies. I mean, even,
absolutely.
You know, even as of late, but I mean, none will ever, you know, trump the first original Jaws. I mean, I got to tell you, it was a little bit before my time, but even when I watched it, you know, I was ankle deep in the ocean, brother. Believe you me, for years on end, because you know, wasn't no great white fin to take me out, you know,
That's
deep
right.
in there. So I didn't get much past the ankles. It took a little while before I had to realize you got to be kind of, I say deep, but there's shark. I live on the South Carolina, so there was actually like a shark this week, and they don't have to be really far out there, man. Those things nowadays are coming in inland. Now, obviously, we're not talking a Jaws type shark, but you know, tiger sharks and stuff like that. I mean, they're coming. You don't have to be far out there to get taken out by one.
Oh, shit, even sand sharks, you could step on one of those by accident and not even realize it, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, just, you know, me and my wife, it's crazy that you know, you mentioned Jaws 3. Is last night we were just looking through some pictures of some sharks. I was on Instagram, and you know how you click on one profile and it'll show you like 50 other profiles of sharks. Those are just some menacing looking creatures, man. Like they just fucking tear you apart. Like you said in the movie, just like a eating, killing machine. That's all they want to do.
That's really all they're there for, is their food chain, you know?
Wow. So, I mean, being on the set, I mean, that had to be really cool. I know you said the first one was Jaws. Was there one that like kind of jarred you to like say, okay, I want to do, you know, get into the makeup thing? Was there a certain monster that you seen, or?
Not particularly going on set lit that fire. What lit that fire, I was really into, I'm a music guy, so I've been really into music my whole life. And as I grew into a teenager, I learned to play guitar, like started around 12, 13 years old, right around when I posted that picture. I was just starting to learn guitar. And you know, and then I'm one of those guys that has to know how to do everything. So you know, luckily my parents tolerated it, and I you know, I went and got a drum set, I went and got a bass. You know, I had to learn it all. So I started out, you know, playing in bands and stuff, and I wanted to do some really theatrical type performances, and it all kind of evolved from there. You know, as a kid reading, you know, like Famous Monsters and all the monster magazines and Cinefantastique and Fangoria, and you know the drill. So it's like doing that and being a monster kid, being really into monsters. I wanted to do something theatrical with my band as I moved forward, and it just evolved and evolved. And once I graduated high school, I was doing some pretty elaborate, weird kind of goth death rock kind of music, and we were trying to develop a stage show that would be kind of shocking and very like vampiric. So I wound up with this guitarist named Sean Brennan, who's who has a band called London After Midnight. So I was one of the co-founders of that band. And, you know, we started talking about that stuff. And our other roommate, Sean's brother, is an effects artist named Kevin. And Kevin worked on a lot of movies.
You're talking about Kevin Tenney?
Kevin Brennan.
Oh, Brennan. Okay.
And our other roommate was Steve Johnson of XFX.
Okay.
So he had done Ghostbusters and, you know, Big Trouble in Little China. So I had this, you know, makeup effects superhero living in my house. So I was starting to, you know, kind of, you know, throw stuff at him and say, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do this? Can we do that? You know, and get away with it on stage. And eventually, you know, Steve just kind of like, he wound up saying, hey, you know, I've got this movie coming up. I'm not at Boss Film anymore. I'm trying to go out on my own, do my own thing. And it was when he had just started XFX. He was sharing a studio with a gentleman by the name of Todd Masters. I think some of the makeup effects nerds will know his name. Mm-hmm. So Todd and he were sharing a shop, and he said, I got this movie with a director, Kevin Tenney, called Night of the Demons. And why don't you just come make rubber monsters? Wow. So I really literally like fell into it. I didn't like go that path, but you know, I wasn't going to say no to that. So
no, absolutely. Now, Night of the Demons, I got to tell you, that's one of my most like favorite horror movies from back in the day. I can't tell you the exact time and date that I watched that to begin with. I know it was on VHS. I didn't see it in the theaters. I mean, I don't even know the gap between when it was released and when I seen it, but it was one of those movies that I would just rewatch over and over, because it wasn't like a who's the killer type movie or what happens with the killer at the end. So it wasn't like it was plot ruined. And I just, even to this day, like it still holds up. And all those characters, like what parts of the makeup did you have your hands on? Because it looked like, especially Stooge at the end when he's all burnt, that was some really cool shit that y'all done with him. Now, obviously, that probably only had to be for a little bit of time because he got burnt there towards the end. But what all did you have your hands on with that?
Well, the cool thing about it was like my first legitimate, like I had tried a lot of different things with video and played around with stuff, you know, and talking to Steve and asking him if certain things would work. I think, you know, maybe kind of sparked something in him going, this guy could be, could do really well with us. So you have to realize on a film like that, like there was a crew of probably 10 guys and gals. We're all working on different aspects of the film. And I kind of, being that was my first film, you know, I had my hands in everything, whether it was making molds, castings, painting, you know, I kind of had my hands in everything and was learning as much as I could and absorbing. I remember building a test head for the iPop scene.
Oh yeah, with
we did a test head for that. That was all
Jay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know the real names. I just remember the character names.
And funny enough that you mentioned Night of the Demons today. Roger, Alvin Alexis, who played Roger, it's his birthday today.
Wow, happy birthday to him. Roger, one of the only, not to spoil it for you, but if you ain't seen that, shame on you folks, but he was a survivor of that movie, Roger.
Yeah, Alvin is like super cool people. I really like working with him and just chatting with him.
Dude, I mean, you know, obviously you don't know how people are from being a viewer of a movie, but it seems like to me, and I could be wrong, but it seems like to me everybody on that cast probably would have had just as much fun off camera as they did on. I mean, it just seemed like a really group of people that meshed well. I know that's not always the case, but you know, sometimes as a viewer, you can pick up on when people might not like each other. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's good for the film.
Yeah, sometimes it feeds what's going on.
Right.
But in this case, no, you're right. You're right. Everybody really got along. Everybody was there. They knew what they were there to do, and everybody was super cool. I can't remember anything on that film that was a problem. Kevin was funny as hell. You know, all of the talent. I mean, Amelia, Linnea. I mean, you can't ask for better. Like,
all right. Now, you know that I got to ask you about the lipstick and the tit scene here. Did you have anything to do with that? Because I mean, As a kid, seeing that was one of the things I re-rented it when my buddies would come over. I was like, man, you got to see this scene. This girl puts lipstick in her tit and it disappears.
Emotionally scarring.
Yeah. And I mean, not to mention, I didn't realize at those points, I weren't old enough to connect the dots between the actors, but I had seen Linnea in, what was Return of the Living Dead 2 when she played Trash, and she's up there, you know, stripping on the tombstone. And many other.
Linnea is another one. She's one of the coolest people that I've
man, I mean, just
hung out with or talked to or anything. Like, she's just super cool people.
Yeah, she seems like she's so down to earth. I'd love to get her on the show at some point and talk with her. But did you have your hand in that any at all? How did that work?
A little bit, yeah. It was all done, designed by Steve. But I had my hands in that a little bit.
Can you share any trade secrets? Where did that lipstick go? My God!
Here's the process. Here's the process. So we took what's called a life cast of Linnea's chest.
Okay.
So we took her chest and made a new false chest that went right over the top of hers. Mm-hmm. So essentially, what that was on set, if I remember correctly, it was a gelatin piece. So being gelatin, it can get pretty messed up pretty easily, but we had a few of them. So put one on, she pulls, you know, her top open or whatever and does the lipstick thing with it and can literally push through that first skin, that gelatin skin. We just made a little slit on the nipple.
Yeah.
And she's able to just push that thing right inside there, and it's hidden in between her real breast and her overlay.
Wow, you just totally ruined that. As a kid,
magic.
I mean, obviously that was one of the things that stood out, but you know, just the whole premise and the setup, I think, worked, you know, especially I think at that time, you know, going to that house and then doing whatever that thing they did with the mirror and then the demon coming out, and whose idea was that to kind of go point of view with the thing flying through the halls? Because that really, I thought, worked very, very well, and might I add a little bit, it's an effective way to do it cheap, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I honestly, I couldn't tell you who was responsible for thinking that up. I'd like to say Steve, because Steve is like any kind of vision like that Kevin may have had and said, hey, we want to do this. Steve is a master fabricator, and he's a master at like, oh, we can do it like this. You know, he'll just think of it immediately.
Right.
And so I wouldn't doubt that was probably all Steve.
Okay. I mean, any cool Night of the Demons stories before we move on? Because I mean, you know, just so many memorable characters. I love Sal, especially when he died saving you. They had the tombstone there automatically. Sal died that night. Yeah. I get so tickled at that when I'm rewatching that, and I mean, just
I'll tell you
little quirks.
I'll tell you a little side story about that. I remember I went out to the East Coast to a place called the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, and I did an appearance with Amelia at that drive-in, and I had a fan bring up a Sal Ramiro headstone for me to sign, and I just thought that was the coolest thing that I've ever signed.
Sal,
it was neat.
You know, there actually, I don't know if it's out. I was looking, there was like a I don't know what the year anniversary is, but it was like a making of Night of the Demons. You know anything about that?
I honestly don't.
Okay, I don't know if it's out or if it was out. I was seeing like bits and pieces, and it was hard to track down. So I don't know if it ever got made. I don't know if it was like a fan film where it was trying to get made. It was like a documentary where they were interviewing a lot of the people. But I mean, man, that's one thing that I would pay to get my hands on, because you know, it just seemed like you guys probably had such a blast filming that. And was it like a short filming time too? Wasn't it like a month or so?
Yeah, all of those, like a lot of the films I worked on in between 87 and 88 were all really fairly short schedules, and they had, you know, they had their problems with, you know, timing and needing more budget, things like that. But it was such a whirlwind to work on something like that. It seemed like it went smoothly. I don't remember a lot of problems.
Okay.
The most fun was like the rap party was the most fun in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm working. I was going to ask, what was probably like your most fondest memory of that whole thing? Was it the rap party?
Yeah, probably the rap party.
One thing I didn't get, and I'm going to ask you, at the end when the guy eats the apples and his throat's bust open and the old lady's sitting there and she says, "Happy Halloween, dear." Well, I mean, so what's with that? Is she possessed? I didn't get that as a kid, and I'll be honest, I still don't now. What the hell's going on with the old lady?
That's that same couple that's in the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's there when
so
he's like, he's pissed off and he says he bought the apple. I think he actually shows the razor blades and the apples at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I don't know what part of the story that has to do with. I'll just say that maybe she's just sick of his grumpy old ass and decided to do something about it. You know?
Yeah, when did you make this? Oh, last night I had to do something with all those leftover apples. Now, did you have anything to do with the sequels to those, or not
No,
anything at all? Okay, because that thing spawned, I think, 2 sequels and a remake, if I'm not mistaken.
If I remember correctly, Amelia did 2 subsequent films as Angela.
Yeah,
and then I think they remade it in the 90s.
They did. I think it had the chick from American Pie in it. Her name escapes me, but she was the one that what's his name was with on film. I forgot her name. You know, the one he had that embarrassing moment with on film, Jason Biggs.
Right.
Can't remember her name. It escapes me. But she was the lead in that one. So after that, what was your next film after that? Was it Dead Heat?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I seen that movie as a kid, and it's been a long time ago, and I need to go back and rewatch it because when I was looking over some of your work, I remember seeing it as a kid. But Treat Williams, man, what a cool dude to work with. I mean, how was he?
You know what's surprising about Treat is like not just like a cool guy. I mean, he was a cool guy to talk to and work with. He was very pleasant, you know. And when you're in the business that we're in, you know, you put these people in makeup chairs for like 6-7 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. It can be really grueling and they can get very grumpy. And I got to say that both Treat and Joe were just so fucking fun to work with. They were just hilarious. I mean, all I can remember is from even the time that we were working at the shop creating their looks, all the way to the set. Like these guys were just doing the most ridiculous Jerry Lewis impersonations and just being absolute clowns the entire time.
I was listening on a podcast where you said there was like a ton of Jerry Lee Lewis or was it Huey Lewis or Jerry Lewis?
Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis, yeah.
Ow, lady. Ow, ow, ow with the hiding.
Yeah, I remember that being like a sort of a fun movie as a kid. I need to go back, excuse me, and give it a rewatch. I really do. I remember watching it, and Joe Piscopo at the time. I mean, he got jacked for that movie. He was big.
He was big.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of workout regimen he was on. I need to get on it now.
The huge deal for me on that film was meeting Vincent Price. That was
legend.
That was nuts. It was kind of funny because I remember us being at the shop. We had to do a life cast on Vincent, and everybody's kind of waiting for him to show up. And it's this, you know, it's a sunny morning. We're all there kind of at the shop doing our thing. And we were joking around. I think we were joking around about like, oh, you know, what's going to happen is Vincent's going to pull up in this big black car. The skies are going to go dark. Lightning's going to start. You know, it's going to just be this epic cinematic, you know, creepy dude thing. And funny enough, when he pulled up, it did start raining. but he was like the nicest man. And a little funny side note is when we were doing his life cast, he fell asleep in it, and we thought we might have killed him.
He killed a legend there, by God.
Yeah.
I know, you know, when I watched a lot of horror movies as a kid, and then as I got older, I started venturing back and looking at some of the older movies, some of the black and whites. And I woke up one night in the middle of the night, it's probably like 2 or 3, and the original House on Haunted Hill was on with him, and had everybody there. Yeah. And it was that part where the guy's like kind of knocking along the wall with the lantern or light, and he's knocking, and goes down, he comes up, and that woman's like hanging over his back. It scared me so loud. I screamed so fucking loud that like my mom come running in. She thought somebody was like trying to break through the window or something. And I had to bitch up and tell her that something scared me on a movie. But like those things, man, back in those days, those effects, I mean, they worked. I mean, it scared me then. I don't know what year that was. I was watching it. I mean, it had to scare the hell out of people back in those days. Oh, yeah. What a legend Vincent was, and what a lot of great movies he's got under his belt.
For sure, for sure.
So on from Dead Heat, how did you get involved in the Nightmare series? Because I mean, that was obviously was trucking along and it had a lot of heat behind it. How did that come about?
Well, that one, that one's. Let me think about the timeline here. I think I went from Dead Heat into Howling 4, and then from Howling, I think I went on to the Blob,
Blob. Yeah.
then from Blob to Nightmare 4.
Okay.
So
So you didn't
yeah,
have anything to do with three at all?
no, but I have an interesting story that kind of leads from the Blob into Nightmare 4.
Okay, yeah, let's shoot with that. I wasn't sure
I
which one come first, Blob or Four, so we'll go with.
Well, we were shooting at this kind of at the same time. Nightmare 4 had started shooting while we were finishing on the Blob,
Okay.
and we had some stages at a place called Dream Quest out in Simi Valley, and I remember Mick Strawn, who was the production designer on Nightmare 3 and 4. He had built part of the junkyard, the miniature junkyard, out at Dream Quest, and I sort of wandered in there because I was in between shit and bored, walk around, see what's going on. So I kind of went in there to see what was going on, and Mick was there, and I asked what he was doing, and he was like, "Oh, you ought to give Steve Johnson a call, and they're working, they're doing the effects on this, and you ought to give him a call." So I was leaving Blob, and so I called Steve back, and I had moved out of the house by then. I wasn't still roommates with him, but I gave him a call, and he was like, "Yeah, we're doing. We could use you if you want to come back and do some fabrication, some puppeteering, and whatnot." And then I also had worked with Screaming Mad George and was working with Screaming Mad George, so I had opportunities at both places. So I kind of ping ponged back and forth between Screaming Mad George's shop, which was doing the cockroach transformation
Oh
on
wow.
Brooke, and then the Freddy's death sequence is what Steve was doing. So we worked on that. That took an enormous crew to make that happen too.
Yeah, I bet we've actually interviewed Lisa Wilcox
Yeah,
on the show, and
Lisa's a good friend.
oh yeah, yeah, super cool. And those were probably, I might get heat for saying this, but even over the first one, I enjoyed three and four the most out of that
Yeah,
whole series, and I bounced back and forth on which ones out of those two that I
sure.
liked. I remember as a kid not enjoying five as much. When I was prepping for her interview, I just decided to rewatch five, just to kind of as a refresher, and I think it maybe appealed better to adults than the kids, because at that time Freddie was damn near four kids almost, if that makes any sense. Even though he's a pedophile and
Yeah,
whatever the case may be. I mean, he had almost turned MTV. I think that is what they call him, like the
that's what we
MTV
call them.
Cribs.
Yeah, we call it 3 and 4 the rock and roll nightmares.
But that five dealt with a lot of stuff like, depression and teenage pregnancy and
Yeah,
stuff like that. So I think it was probably, it had its, people that appreciated it, but I think is coming off three and four, it might not have, delivered what you were hoping for.
right.
But three and four, man, I mean, those were hands down my favorites. Like I said, I might even put those above the sequels. Renee Harlan, who went on to have a fantastic career and stuff other than horror, like Cliffhanger, and
Mm-hmm.
he did one of the Die Hards. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and he was new, wasn't that his first movie?
I don't remember if it was his first movie, but I know it might have been either his first or second film. I mean, he was very fresh, and he was. We also dealt with. I don't know if how much Lisa told you, but we're dealing with a writer's strike on that movie.
Wow, she
So
made
yeah, it
mention
was
that.
really short time to film in, and we were dealing with a writer's strike. So believe it or not, I mean, really, the cast and crew. The greatest thing about four, like technically speaking, three is the better film. Like start to finish, technically, it's a more put together film.
Mhm.
But four, being what it is, and a lot, I don't know how many people know now because like Mick wrote a book about it, and it's been in a
Yeah,
couple books and it's been talked about. But four was basically like the crew. We knew we had to top three. So with the writer's strike and all the other little caveats that were happening, we just knew we had to put together a really killer film, and everybody just gave it their best. So really, to me, I would say 4 is the movie that was put together by the entire cast and crew, because the cast were writing their own dialogue in between takes.
Wow.
They'd look at a scene and go, well, what can we do here? How can we bounce this off each other? And really did a lot. I'm sure Lisa mentioned some of that, but they wrote a lot of their own dialogue. Lisa came up with the whole, when they were shooting the diner, the Crave Inn, she was playing around with the silverware on the table, and was playing around with it, and it, like, the way the lighting was set up, it threw a shadow on the wall. So when you see the shadow that's Freddy's glove on the wall, that was actually Lisa that came up with that, just by messing around with stuff on the set.
It's crazy how things happen like that on the fly that wind up making it, into the film later on. Yeah. And sometimes when you got to put stuff together like that, you come up with magic. It happens. Like, not all the time. Sometimes you come up with shit, but sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle. And I think you guys did with that film, because it struck. It had something for everybody. It had the Rick, the Kung Fu brother, Alice, she's kind of suffering her thing, the badass chick, and I forgot her name now, the one that died with the cockroach.
Debbie.
Yeah,
the
Debbie.
Character's name, yeah.
You had it all for somebody to relate with. And I think that was a key to those movies back in those days. You wanted to have a character somewhere in the mix that you could relate to. Not everybody's a tough jock, or not everybody's, a bookworm or a nerd, or not everybody's subtle and laid back like Alice, who made a huge transformation in that movie. Like, in the beginning, she's wearing like these, long dresses and kind of laid back, and more of a, I guess, goody two-shoes, if you will.
We just talked about that the other day. I was talking about the character arc in that, because she started out very timid and very, very kind of shy, very kind of shy. But by the end, she's wearing the leather jacket. She's gotten in check. She's a badass. She really absorbed the personalities of her friends.
Yeah. And that's not always easy to do.
No.
When you're acting, because when you're playing that in the beginning, you have to play it a little bit more meek and a little bit more laid back. And then when you get to the other end of the spectrum, you got to turn it on. So, that's not an easy thing to pull off, but she did it great.
Yeah.
She did it fantastic. And there's so many scenes in there, memorable, with the meatball, with him eating the meatball with his face in it. And from what I understand, wasn't like there was already trailers, or at least posters out, while you guys were still filming, because back then they were pumping these movies out yearly. It was quick.
Yeah, it was almost every year there was another one being made, because Freddy was just gold,
Oh yeah, you couldn't do no wrong with it. I remember as a kid, seeing him. I don't know if I ever seen a Freddy in the theater other than 6. I think 6 was the first one that I actually seen in the theater. But I remember as a kid, my dad would take me to the video store, and I'm just waiting. And luckily we had a close friend of the family that worked at the video store, so she would kind of hold one if it come in there, or she could hold them, from the start. She would hold one for us to come in there, because she knew I was a big horror movie fan. And, I think those were the days. That's kind of a lost something that the kids nowadays don't get, because now you can just click a button and have everything at your fingertips. Yeah. There was something there about having to go to the video store and being excited on the way there, and just looking. You got all these titles there you could look at. It's sad that that's not around anymore, because box art, especially for some of the Freddy Krueger movies and other ones like the Blob and, Night of the Demons as well, a box art could make or break your money, because you see that box art, that's going to immediately draw you to, take it, flip it over, read the synopsis on the back. And I think there's just something missing about this brand of generation that's just not getting that.
Yeah, much like the music industry, where you used to go into record stores and flip through records, look at the album art. It was the same concept,
Yeah.
We don't have those things anymore, and the newer generation doesn't get to experience that. So it's like this whole experience that I feel is missing from the movie industry. Because for me too, like going into the store, the rental stores, I would rent movies based on the box art. I'd be like, oh, that looks cool, and just grab it. And even if it was crap, you were like, oh, this is so cool. So
No, I get that 100%.
yeah.
Sometimes they would really get you because whatever they've seen on the box, you're waiting to see in the movie, and then
Yeah,
that
and it's
person
not
or
there.
that thing never shows up, and I'm like, what the hell? That's false advertisement.
Right, right.
I talked with a guy the other day. Matter of fact, it was our latest podcast. His name was Edward Dosey, and he was a shooter of the rock and roll bands. He shot Steven Tyler, Elton John, Slash, Alice Cooper, Buddy Guy. Some of the greats. And we were talking about that same thing, how back in those days, too, an album cover could make or break an album.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
think of some of the most iconic album covers you ever seen with Kiss and Guns N' Roses. Those album covers are synonymous. It's like one of those things now where you see them, you automatically know what it is.
Yeah.
And movies were the same way. You remember seeing Night of the Demons, and you're seeing Angela, just this creepy looking fucking character on there. You're like, holy shit, that looks cool. And then you kind of read it on the back. Kids show up to party, demons. Fuck yeah, this is mine. I'm renting this. That was just a way to draw you in. And nowadays the kids just do not have that. And it's
No.
really sad. When I moved here, I used to live in a small town called Darlington, and I moved here to Charleston, 2010, and there was still a few blockbusters hanging around. And I remember when they closed that last one and Netflix was kind of starting to dominate the scene. I told my son, he was probably like 6 at the time, I was like, you don't know what you're missing now with all the stuff going away. I was like, because even me as an adult, it was still kind of exciting to go through and look at something that you may not have seen, or, catch a movie that might have got by you. Because back then you didn't have the internet. You couldn't go on and search all this shit.
Right.
You missed something on a trailer on a TV, it might have got by you. And some of these movies were straight to VHS movies. Yep. So you might not even have seen a trailer. And
slews of them were straight to VHS. Slews and slews of them.
Especially what Roger Corman, all the
Yep.
slumber parties, sorority house massacres.
Yep.
I mean, I love those things. I would rent those, 5 at a time, and just, me and my friends would binge watch them through the weekends. And that's just, I swear, it's just something that this generation is not getting to experience like we did coming up.
Yeah, streaming is completely different experience than that. I mean, there was just something about, being excited about going to the video store, finding all your shit, getting all your candy, get everything together for that weekend. And that was it, man. I was at home watching movies all weekend with my friends.
Yeah.
That was it.
I hate that people aren't getting to experience that. Well, I mean, back to Nightmare 4. So that death scene at the end where all the hands come out and basically tear Freddy apart.
Yep.
Was that the one that they had the big model of, and then didn't the model like fall over?
Yes.
In the middle of filming or something. So tell us a little bit about that. We heard a little bit about that with the podcast with Lisa, but you tell us your version, because sometimes people have different versions.
Well, so being involved in that particular sequence, it took quite a bit to make all of those souls come out of Freddy. Part of that, for the close-ups, we made a 15-foot torso of Freddy's chest. So you have this great big 15-foot torso, and you have real people that are painted and greased up and like put behind this like thing they're trying to push out of, right?
Right.
Linnea is actually one of them.
I was about to say, wasn't Linnea in there?
Yeah, Linnea and Steve were dating at the time and eventually got married at one point.
Now, Steve, you're talking from
Johnson.
Okay. Didn't she date the guy that done Night of the Demons?
Same guy.
Oh, same guy. Okay. All right.
So, so Steve had conceptualized this giant torso that we fabricated and brought in and put, I don't know, it was 5 or 6 people that were painted, and they're supposed to push out of it on this like dental dam like material that looks like skin, but it's rubber, and they push forward. So it was supposed to be, sandbagged down and counterweighted and all that stuff. And we had a puppeteer on top of it named Michiko, this little tiny Japanese woman, coolest lady in the world. She was sitting on top of it. And I know that when they were, it all happened so fast, but I remember it happening like Steve called action, because Steve was directing the effect sequences. And I remember him calling action, and I think people were just pushing into that dental dam to like really show that people are coming out of him.
Yeah.
and they're getting that shot, but it just put too much pressure on that torso, and it was top heavy. It was, I don't know if it wasn't tied up at the top, because I thought we had a cable on it, but it just came tipping forward and everybody scattered. So Michiko was on top of it and she came down with it. Luckily, nobody got hurt.
Damn.
That could have been really bad, but
I ain't lying. Coming down from 15 feet, that's no.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, I actually
down, brother.
I actually did that last August, and I have a plate and 8 screws in my foot because of it.
Yeah, that's
you know, I came out of a 16-foot ceiling, and I didn't come out scot-free. So
that's no small height to fall from,
No.
especially free falling on an apparatus like that too. You probably got no idea what's coming out of it, screws, bolts, or.
I think luck was on our side that day, because she stayed on top of the thing while it came down, and if I remember right, she was just jarred off of it at the last impact.
Wow.
So yeah, she didn't get hurt, thank God.
That's another cool thing too, how you guys done that. I guess the movie magic, because as a kid I would have never thought that was a 15-foot torso.
Yeah.
Like thing coming, trying to bust through like you explained. But the cockroach scene, man, that's like, if I'm thinking of all of Freddy's kills, the cockroach and the Welcome to Primetime bitch, they're like side by side. They're fairly close, but the cockroach definitely a little bit more elaborate. How in the hell did y'all do that?
Well, I have to say that, like, one of the most disturbing kills, I'm going to kind of backtrack here into 3, because for me, like, by the time I got on 4, I was a pretty good fan of Freddy. I couldn't believe that I actually got a job on a Freddy film. So I was really happy to be there. But like, one of my favorite kills was the kid, the marionette with
when it walked him off.
Yeah. Oh man. And with the tendons and stuff coming out of him. Oh man. I just
bastard him right on.
You could feel that, you could just feel that. So that was like one of my favorite kills. But yeah, the cockroach sequence, a lot of people love that. And what's funny about that is Mick Strawn will tell you that he and a lot of the executives and whatnot involved in Nightmare, like, Screaming Mad George is, first of all, Japanese, so there's a little bit of a language barrier. He has a very heavy Japanese accent,
right?
So people don't always understand what he's saying. And I know, like, Mick was down there to try and get, figure out what we're doing and how we're doing this effect. And I didn't really, there's several guys there at the shop that were capable of stepping in and explaining it to Mick, but George would just, as Mick tells it, he says George is just like grabbing stuff off the table and saying, oh, and running around the shop like it's a flying cockroach and saying, we're going to do this. He just had no idea of how this was going to go off, and he was worried, like genuinely worried. So it's kind of funny to hear that now and realize that I could have been a liaison between the two of them and said, oh, we're just doing this, and explained it in easy terms for Mick to understand, because Mick is a mechanical effects guy, so he understands, like, the mechanics of the platform we had to make. And like, Mick actually made the platform we put Brooke on, so that her body, she would be under it, and then there would be a false body over it with the arms.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a false body over it with the arms, and then we had buckets of these skins that are the arms for when the cockroach pieces break through.
Right.
There's like skins, and it's I always like to make a joke that I wish I had like a Kentucky Fried Chicken logo or something I could have put on those buckets, because there's just buckets of these arms. So it would have been fun to just do something stupid like that on set. But
dude, that scene, man, I'll tell you what, this, like, one of my phobias. I cannot stand cockroaches.
Yeah.
I can do, you can put a snake around me. I mean, granted, I'm not a fan of them either, but like, I can deal with being around a rattlesnake or something like that better than I can a cockroach. They give me the weebie-jeebies, something serious. And seeing that was just like, it was one of those, and I guess it's probably, not uncommon to a lot of people. That's why that scene resonated so much with him, her turning into one and then him just crushing it, in his hand. That was just, like you said, one of the most memorable ones. I know people have their favorites, but that was damn sure up there for sure.
It's great.
What was that stuff that she was sticking in?
It's great. I'll tell you a story about that too, but let me back up a little bit. It's not just about her turning into the cockroach. There's a whole lot more going on that make that scene so effective. There's the way the camera moves happen. There's the way that, like, I know the way Mick built the set for when she's actually, it goes from when she's on the bench, on the weight bench, and it pulls and she's inside the cockroach motel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see Freddy's eye in the back of it. And they were actually projecting that onto a screen. They built this huge room that was, I can't remember how long it was. It was pretty long for a camera move to be able to pull back. And they were projecting the eye live on the screen there when we shot. And then, there different things would come in and out of that particular set. Like we had a 3-foot, I think it was 3-foot animatronic cockroach that was puppeteered after she fully transforms into the cockroach.
Right.
And then, poor Brooke, like I still, that lady just blows me away because she's even to this day, she says, "Oh, I'd do it all over again." And I just can't fathom that, because I know if I had to put that shit all over me all the time we had to put it on her, I wouldn't like those people very much.
I mean, and I think that's another thing that people don't get. They see, a 30-second, spot on there, but to get that, and I may be, under or over there with that, but to get that, how many days of shooting did that take to get that shot done?
I can't remember how long it took to do the cockroach part, but if you look at a sequence like that, I mean, you still have to keep in mind that there's weeks of prep before you're even on the set.
Yeah.
There's weeks and weeks of prep. Like you're making all of the makeup stuff. You're having to hand sculpt all this stuff and mold it, paint it, test fit it, make sure that it looks right, make sure that it fits right. There's so much that goes into it. Just like even costuming is the same way. It's there's a lot involved ahead of time before you even get on stage. And so once we were on set, I want to say, I can't remember if that was 4 or 5 days or 2 weeks. I get them flip-flopped. I get Freddy's death and that one flip-flopped because I was on both, and I can't remember which, but I don't remember. I think we were with Brooke for like 2 days and then shot all the other stuff without her after that.
So, I mean, as being working on that, how does it make you feel that all that blood, sweat, and tears went into that, and then you see it on screen? Is it a satisfactory payoff? Because it sounds like to me like probably how I used to be to my old girlfriends, a lot of build up, and then, you got 30 seconds of enjoyment out of it. Is it cool to, see that on the screen? And is it worth everything you put into it? Because I know it's a lot of work for you guys. And I obviously I know it's worth it, but do you see, like, when you see that, is it like, man, people have no idea the hell I went through to get that on the screen type of deal?
I think that there are films that I've worked on that I do get that feeling from. Nightmare, like for me, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that movie, and I'm glad that I was part of it because, it's just, I mean, it was Freddy, for Christ's sakes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And to be part of that franchise is just really cool. And I never thought until probably 2016, I didn't think anybody gave a shit about the fact that I worked on those films. I was enlightened by people contacting me and asking me to be on something similar to this, but it was a podcast, but it wasn't a video podcast. And I remember it was a live thing, and I was on it, and they had callers like calling in live from, like, I had people up at 4 a.m. in like Norway calling and asking me questions. And it blew me away. It blew me away at how deep of a reach the horror genre has.
Oh yeah.
And how deep a meaning it has to its fans. So for me, it took like those fans just acknowledging my work, and I didn't even ask for it. It was really kind of overwhelming for a couple of years, and took me some time to process it and get out and, like, I need to get out and meet these people because,
Yeah. I mean, and that's why, you have these cons and stuff that you guys do. And that's amazing for the fans. And I guess that's kind of, we talked earlier about, the kids are missing something these days, not being able to go into a blockbuster and have that experience. But at the same time, they're gaining things like this to be able to talk to you guys. Because back in those days, no one really, unless they just dove deep into, who done what, had a clue who was doing the dirty work, so to speak, the makeup, getting all this stuff done, unless you were like deep into like Fangoria and stuff like that.
Right.
It's not like today's time where you and I can sit down and have this podcast and, I'm going to promote it as such, done the makeup for Night of the Demons, Nightmare 4. So it does, technology advancing, it does open opportunities for people to get new information like this, to appreciate you and what you've done, because it's good for you to be able to get that appreciation for what you've done. Like we said, those are iconic movies. Night of the Demons, the Nightmare 4, those iconic sequences and kills. It's good for you to be able to get the recognition, because like you said, that was a lot of work you put into it. So I'm glad that you're getting, some recognition for your work.
Yeah, it's been really cool, and doing like the conventions and talking to fans and the way that that's evolved, and you're more connected to those people, which is really kind of cool for me. What that did for me was inspired me to do more, and I know now by talking to fans that what they feel is lacking in the business, or they feel what's lacking in that genre. Like. And doing that has inspired me I started my own production company over the whole COVID thing. And being injured, like I had like 2 years to kind of figure things out and be like, what am I going to do next? So I decided to start my own production company, and I've also partnered with Subsoil Films on the East Coast. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. They're pretty good horror producers, but
I have to dig into them. I'm a huge.
Yeah, I partnered with those guys, and I also started my own thing, and I have like 7 films in development right now.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and the one is actually behind me on the wall. You can see a poster for it, Phobia.
Oh, okay.
That's that. I'm going to be directing that film, and it stars Lynn Lowry, who is in I Drink Your Blood.
Yes.
And The Crazies.
Yeah, The Crazies. I remember.
Yeah, she's co-producing that with me, and she's going to star in it. And I really can't wait to make that film. It is fucking disturbing.
Well,
it is a disturbing movie.
That's something that's missing nowadays, those good old throwback horror films, I think, are missing. A lot of them today, man, they're just really cheesy. I tell my son, who watches a lot of these things, I'm just like, you don't really know good horror. You got to go back to the 80s, to get good horror. Every now and again, you get one that'll surprise you and kind of withstand the test of time. But I think by and large now, the way horror was done, I think in its heyday, I don't know if we'll ever get back to anything quite that good. And maybe one of the things is CGI. Maybe it's going too computerized, but doing things the way you guys did, I think it had a certain element to it that maybe just a tad bit more realistic.
Right. And that's kind of that's some of the feedback I get from fans, and I've taken that into consideration. And one of the films we're developing now is called Campfire. It's an anthology, and a lot of people think anthology and they think creep show or whatever, and that's not really the direction we want to go with Campfire. Although we love those movies, there's nothing wrong with those movies. I want to go with more of a Twilight Zone kind of feel. With the stories, how they kind of transition, and they're a lot more serious things. They are the things you talk about around a campfire, those tales you tell, and the real versions of them.
Yeah, like I always thought something like a updated grown-up version of like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because I don't know if you watched those back in the day on Nick at Night, but when I was young and watching those Are You Afraid of the Dark, some of those things, even for a kid's show, was pretty damn creepy. I don't even really know how they got away with doing some of those things that they got on there, but it was really, the premise of it was really, really good. Those shows back in there, even to be on something like Nickelodeon. We're closing in on an hour here. There's one film that I want to talk to you about. We don't have to spend a ton of time. You can just kind of tell me what you've done on it, and it was one of my favorites too, because I don't know if I classify it as a horror, maybe sci-fi, but Tremors. Kevin Bacon. We got Fred Ward recently passed away. So
Yeah.
rest in peace, to him and prayers to his family. But what a great movie. What did you do in that one? Did you obviously you just kind of had on the graboids, I guess they called it. Was that your
Yeah.
work? Or?
Yeah. Yeah. I worked on the graboids. So that was a really large crew. And for me, it was some new people to work with that I had never worked with. And that was Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff. Some of the coolest guys I've ever met. Very cool to work for, very driven. And those guys, prior to starting ADI, had worked for Stan Winston.
Uh-huh.
So, and we all know Winston's work.
Oh,
His
yeah.
work is amazing. So, like for me, I was really nervous to work on it, first of all, and I had no idea what the movie even was. So Kevin Reeder, who was not only my roommate at the time, but big fiberglass guy, mold guy. We went and talked to both Alec and Tom, and were hired on to do all of the giant molds of the 1-to-1 worms, and also fabricate their heads. So yeah, basically that's what I did on it, was make the big worms. And they had miniature worms. And the crew was huge because they had different scales of the graboids to make.
Yeah,
And
that was one of the things where they could hide maybe the big showing of like the actual worm head until later
Yeah.
on. You got the little small snake like ones
right.
that come out. But that's another movie too. You've had your hands on a lot of first movies that spawned a shitload of sequels. I don't even know how many that one had, and they were supposed
7.
to do 7. Wasn't they doing like a remake that had Kevin Bacon back, and I think it got canned for some reason.
They started to do a series, and I'm not sure if it was Netflix or HBO or who the hell had started the process. They had Kevin. They actually started to make it, and the plug was pulled. I had a museum here in Las Vegas that had some stuff from that. And unfortunately, I don't remember why they pulled the plug on it. I don't know if it had to do with, what's his name? Burt Gummer, the guy that plays Burt Gummer.
Yeah.
He owns the rights to the franchise.
Really?
So I believe that Michael Gross, that's his name. I believe that there may have been something with Michael that stopped it.
Wow, he owns the rights. What, did he buy them?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, because he's in like every fucking sequel, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
He bought it, and he's the one that made almost all the movie. Well, he did make all the movies other than the first one. Yeah, he grabbed onto the franchise and just kept running with it. Wow. And like I said, Gummer's a great character.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Character.
Yeah.
And he just, he's still, although the graboids have turned into CG graboids.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate, because I did see the most recent one, and it was pretty disappointing.
I don't know if I've seen it. I think I might have seen 2 when they had like babies walking around or whatever. Yeah. And after that, it just kind of trailed off. But, I was really excited about that one because I think they put out a full-blown trailer. It had, Kevin Bacon back as Val.
Yeah.
I was excited about it. And then it just.
Yeah, it was kind of cool because their premise was they had, what was Chang? Was it Chang that had the store?
Yeah.
So Chang is no longer alive.
Right.
The premise was that Kevin Bacon had taken over the store, and he had all of this like Tremors, like graboid merch.
Yeah.
Like that's all he was doing, was selling graboid stuff. And it was interesting because we had some of that stuff in the museum, but that's what I get the premise was. It was going to start with him having Chang's store.
I would love to, well, I guess if it was him,
it's a shame because I think it really could have done really well.
Oh, me too. I was excited about it. I think anybody that was a fan of that movie and that whole franchise would have been, stoked about it. I was really, when I seen that trailer, I was jacked. I was like, oh man, this is going to be awesome. I thought it was a movie. I didn't even realize it was a series, but a series even better. That would have been amazing to see.
Yeah. I don't think I appreciated the movie enough when we first made it. I kind of thought when I was young, I was probably 21, 22 when we made that film.
Wow.
And I think for me, it was like, oh, this is, but as I got older, I started to realize that movie, much like the Blob, like I really enjoyed the remake of the Blob. And having worked on it, that was something that was kind of fun for me. But I didn't realize the gravity of Tremors at the time, that we were making a monster movie. Like there were slasher movies, there was all kinds of stuff going on, but Tremors was a monster movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In this traditional fashion monster movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't appreciate it enough until I got older and had kids. And that's like, that's a monster movie you can take your kids to. Yeah. It's scary, but it's a monster movie you can take your kids to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a step outside of maybe, I don't want to say comfort zone, but maybe what you were used to, at that time, working with Night of the Demons and Dead Heat and the Blob and Nightmare. Definitely probably a change of scenery, working with on that crew and with those guys. But I mean, still a fantastic film.
Absolutely.
And, I'm a big as horror movie fan as I am. And I don't even want to talk about this because I need to watch it. And then maybe we'll have you back later on. But I was going through your IMDb, and I seen the movie Society, and I read the tagline about kid finds out parents is in an orgy cult, and I'm the fan horror boy in me is damned ashamed that I've never seen this movie. What can I expect in closing here of this interview? What can I expect from Society?
It's like nothing you've ever seen.
Well, damn it, I'm going to watch it right now.
It's hard to describe because I will say a couple things about it. The original script by Woody Keith and Brian Usna, we'll talk about this. That movie was Brian Usna's directorial debut. He had produced a whole bunch of stuff, but that was his first shot at directing. And Brian's fucking genius, as is George. George, I worked for George on that film. And originally it was supposed to be more like a blood cult kind of thing. Well, they looked at it and Brian was kind of underwhelmed by the whole blood cult thing. So he was talking to Screaming Mad George about it. And they developed this idea that these people would be not necessarily human. Right. So it all wound up being based off of a Halloween mask that Screaming Mad George had made for himself that had a hand coming out of it, pulling the flesh away from his face. George is a surrealist artist, and he and I both, got along famously. And that was part of my career. I would have never left working for him. I loved working for him. But yeah, that movie has stuff in it. You will.
I watched the trailer.
If you're a body horror kind of fan, like like that body horror stuff, you'll really like it.
Yeah, when I was my wife, she knows I do this, and I tell her about the people I'm interviewing, and I watched that trailer, and she's on the other side of the table from me. She's doing her work on a computer, and she can hear the trailer going on. She's just like,
yeah, my wife to this day. My wife to this day won't watch that movie.
I read the premise to her. I'm like, all right, well, I know what we're watching tonight when we go to bed. And she's like, by your damn self. She hates horror movies.
Yeah, she saw part of the trailer where, I don't know if it's the trailer that you saw, but there's like a hand moving across a butt.
Yeah.
And it kind of melts into it. My wife saw that and she's like, I am never watching that film.
Oh man, listen, Nick, I've had a blast, man. I'm glad you could come on the show. Before we get out of here, is there any projects that you want to promote or anything that you want to, put out, or any, if you have a book or podcast or anything you want to send guys to keep up with you and what you're doing?
Well, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook as Nick J. Benson Official. And Instagram is at Nick Benson 427. So you can follow me there. I am going to be at Houston Horror Film Festival at the end of this month. I believe that's around the 22nd to the 24th. After that, I will be, I think, Flashback Weekend. I don't think that's been announced yet, but I'll be there. And then Phantasm in Orlando, I'll be there. Creepy Con in Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also be at Scarefest. in
Wow.
October.
Well, you're going to be a busy guy. And I'm assuming when you get these things locked down and these dates, you probably put them on your social medias and stuff
Yeah.
like that and let everybody know. Yeah, I've got to get to one of those things, man. I was supposed to go to one. They had a big one in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and I didn't get to make it. I had some plans come up. I've been to some of the wrestling cons that they have, and they've been fantastic. And I need to get to one of those horror cons and check you guys out, because it looks like to be an absolute blast. So we'll hope our listeners will go, check you out over there, follow you on your social media so they can go get the chance to, maybe meet you in person and grab some merch from you.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, look, Nick, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I've had an absolute blast, and I appreciate your time, man. I sincerely do.
Thanks. Appreciate you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Nick Benson, and unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all-new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Nick, we appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks, brother.